Hello everybody. Fulham next then. District line to Putney Bridge and the trek through that bloody park that seems to get longer every year. God, I miss away trips. I'd really put up with that at the moment. Anyway, kick-off on Saturday is 5:30 p.m. with Sky doing the honours and Eyes Up Mother Brown, football's answer to Last of the Summer Wine, on air from about 5 p.m. if that's your kind of thing. So the Cottagers then. On the face of it, only losing 4 of your last 11 might not be totally a bad thing. Unfortunately, drawing the other 7 is, especially when losing 8 out of your first 11 leaves you trying to bridge something of a gap. Their last win came on the 30th of November when they beat Leicester City away. Since then, they've shared the points with, pause for breath, Liverpool, Brighton twice, Newcastle, Southampton, Spurs and West Brom. The defeats have come at home to Chelsea, Man United and the other night to Leicester and away at Man City, all of which has left them in 18th spot, which as I say is 8 points adrift of Burnley, who occupy the safe spot of 19th place. Fulham are of course managed by our old chum Scott Parker, or not Matthew Upson to give him his full name. I have to say that in his post-match interview the other night after the defeat to Leicester, it did appear that the pressure of the role was beginning to get to him a bit. If it's any consolation, Scott, had all this been happening 10 years ago, you'd have had Mohammed Al-Fayed to deal with as well, so it could be a lot worse. We've had to drag Daisy, the socially distanced, support-bubbling personal assistant with a beautiful smile, back into the office, as Fulham did some business in the transfer window, which closed to a wave of apathy earlier on this week. Apparently. Negotiations to sign Josh King from Bournemouth seem to be progressing, but Everton had other ideas about the matter and swiped him instead. Spurred on by some strange desire to sign any player called Josh, their attentions turned to Josh Maha, who came in on loan. The Lewisham-born Nigerian international spent some time on Fulham's books as a kid, as well as dubiously appearing for Manchester City's youth side, despite still being a Fulham player. He eventually ended up at Sunderland, where his first-team breakthrough was made. In 3 years up on Wearside, he scored 16 times in 41 league appearances, before his move to Bordeaux, which was detailed in all its painful glory by a TV documentary. Having a player who was scoring for fun in League One sitting on a soon-to-expire contract, the Mackhams found them staring down the barrel of a free transfer. So a new deal was offered. Whilst nobody said Maha would definitely sign a new deal, the player did make a comment to the effect that he would be around next year to switch on Sunderland's Christmas light. The next thing you know is the player had gone and picked up all his gear from the training ground and said goodbye, without any transfer actually having taken place. Eventually the player ended up in Bordeaux, where things have been far from plain sailing for him. Hence presumably his desire to return to Blighty to resurrect his career with a club with a vacancy in the ranks for a striker called Josh. One of the brighter stars in their firmament is Ademola Lookman. By all accounts, he's been in good form of late, and commentators seem contractually obliged to mention how well he's recovered from the spectre of that penalty against us earlier on in this season. For those of you with short memories, it was one of the season's funnier moments. The spot kick was so slow that Fabianski had time to dive past the ball and still get up to stop the shot. Of course, the stats will record it as a penalty saved, and I suspect that if either Fabianski or Lookman ever get around to mentioning the save to their grandchildren, it will become one of the greatest saves ever, and no, sorry, we can't find the video footage of it. They'll be without Dutch international Terence Congolo. Congolo's barely made an appearance in the league since arriving from Huddersfield on loan last season, in a deal that was made permanent in the so-called summer window for a fee of £4 million, rising to £7 million with add-ons. Congolo picked up a foot injury last season and only returned to action last month in the cup match against QPR, whereupon he picked up a thigh injury that will keep him out for a few more weeks just yet. They'll also be missing midfielder Tom Kearney, who's missed half of the season played so far with a knee injury that shows no sign of improvement at the moment. Kearney was the subject of a couple of bids from us back in 2018 apparently. Enough of them, let's move on, shall we, to the wild and wacky world of association football. Well, you've got to laugh, haven't you? Sebastian Haller might have been looking forward to playing for Ajax in the Thursday Night League. Who knows, Ajax might even have been looking forward to selecting him. Unfortunately, someone left his name off the form, and he'll be spending his Thursday nights watching his teammates on the box. I mean, fancy having to admit a player for an administrative foul-up as opposed to picking one because of an administrative foul-up. Elsewhere, Newcastle's Joe Linton picked up a £200 fixed penalty notice for having someone over to give him a haircut. Apparently £100 of the fine was a penalty for breaking COVID regulations, whilst the remaining £100 was a penalty for being stupid enough to plaster photographs of himself and his barber all over social media, thus alerting the whole world to the fact that he'd had an illegal haircut. Meanwhile, the use of the words illegal haircut are not believed to be behind Will Zaha's decision to remove the odd spherical bits that were found on the top of his head when we played Palace the other night. Actually, while we're on the subject of haircuts, it's odd to see how many footballers are able to keep their locks in trim and even change styles between games. I guess they're all married to hairdressers then. At the other end of the country to Newcastle, following yet another two-fingered salute to the game that employs him from Mike Dean, Southampton have requested that he not take control of any of their matches going forward. Now, there's no obligation for PGMOL's Mafia to accede to such a request, but wouldn't it be great if the other 10 clubs in the league followed suit, thus sending a message that the likes of Dean won't be tolerated anymore? So let's move on to us. Hands up those of you who looked at the starting 11 on Wednesday and said, "What?" That's most of you then. Me too. I could see that they might want to pick a side to nullify Grealish, but I wasn't convinced that Fredericks was the best way of achieving that aim. Neither did including a player from the start, who'd barely played in months and had about 2 minutes of training with his new teammates, feature high on the presumed agenda for the match. Wrong on both counts, gloriously so. Fredericks played Robin to Soufal's Batman, who'd been tasked with keeping our right-hand side clear of Grealish. And boy did that work. Soufal nullified Grealish so much that it'd be no surprise to hear that Grealish had spent the night having nightmares about the bargain check. That bit where Vlad followed Grealish all the way across the pitch was brilliantly hilarious, and the dynamic duo did such a job on the taxi driver's current cash cow that he was forced to try the other wing, which of course allowed Fredericks to get forward. What can one say about Lingard's debut? Clearly he'd impressed Mr. Moyes enough doing the little training that he'd managed to get under his belt to justify his start, and he was fit enough to survive until stoppage time. He was far less ring-rusty than one might have thought, which is a testament to the way he's obviously been training in his absence from the Salford Lots first team. And how good was it to see a professional footballer smiling so much? So well played, sir, and well played, Mr. Moyes. On the injury front, we have the standard 2 players missing at the moment. Arthur and Darren Randolph are keeping each other company. But other than that, we've got a full squad to pick from. Which brings us nicely onto the prediction. Well, they have improved performance-wise of late, but they're still winless in 11 games. And that sort of thing tends to weigh heavy on a side, particularly if you've got an 8-point gap between you and safety. We, on the other hand, should be full of the joys of spring. So I really must plump for us to win on this occasion. The £2.50, therefore, that was going to go on buying Ajax a hanky to have a knot tied in it, will instead be placed on an away win. Please make it 3-1 to us then, Mr. Wenstone. Enjoy the game.